Hi everybody, welcome to Control, Alt and Compete. Today we're joined by a good friend of mine, Ben Grant. How you doing, Ben?
I'm really well, thanks, James. How are you?
Yeah, good. So you're just back from Sicily?
I am, yeah, just a bit of an impromptu break, but I'm needing it for the Murrays. The weather we're having here, it's been absolutely gorgeous, hasn't it?
Do you know what, see when you told me there, you were like, I just thought about it, I would just go tomorrow. I'd love to just think I could just look at the map and think, yeah, I'll just go to Sicily tomorrow.
Absolutely, well, why not? We're only here once.
But you're a busy man anyways. You know, Ben, there's so many aspects. I know you're only 25, but since I met you, I can't believe like what you've already done in your life. Could you maybe tell me a little bit about yourself growing up? Like, what was young Ben like? I know that was like not that long ago, right? But what was young Ben like?
Young Ben, probably the biggest thing about me growing up was my sport. I was very passionate about my athletics from a young age. My granddad, he had the privilege of leading the GB female sprints team to the last version of the LA Olympics.
Oh, cool.
When the 2012 Olympics were on, I saw Chris Hoy carrying the flag. I thought that's something that I want to do. Could I go away and potentially compete for Scotland one day? I joined my local athletics club and I had the privilege of representing Scotland and Scottish schools over 400 metres
Nice.
at under 16, under 18 level. Which was terrific.
So you're fast then, so you never thought about getting on the bike like Chris then, you feel like you're fast?
Cycling's not for me, that just burns the legs up a little bit too much. But that was always a big passion of mine, sport, and a bit of gaming in my downtime as well.
Yeah. What's your youngest memories of gaming then? What would you think?
It was probably going to the Guile Centre just over the road from here.
All right, okay.
Getting a PlayStation 2 and playing the first version of the Star Wars Battlefield.
All right, cool.
But the graphics were absolutely crap, but so the game was very, very enjoyable. So we had that. Crash Bandicoot, I think was there as well.
House, yeah.
So yeah, that's probably the earliest memories of gaming.
Yeah. And what did you look at it back then? I mean, obviously we can get into it a bit later on, but you know, when you look back to then to now, what do you think about it, with the games industry?
It's just come on leaps and bounds beyond, I think, what anyone could imagine from even 10 years ago, I think. You see the graphics, the interaction, the way that the general industry is developing, where we're moving away from just console-based. We've now got interactivity in the 3D headsets and virtual reality. I think there's something nice about the way things used to be. We used to just plug in your controls and go.
You ruin everything, right? Everything gets ruined.
I wouldn't say so much ruins. There's just certainly a little bit of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And you see from time to time when titles come up on Xbox storefront and you think,
£100.
well, there's that. But I was going to talk about some of the older titles that come up when they've remastered them and you go back and play it.
Yeah.
Are some of them the same? I'm not too sure. I'm talking about the Halo helmet just before we started recording. I know they had the remastered series.
Did you play Halo growing up?
I did. I think I started at Halo Reach though,
right.
which was a bit confusing with the timeline, but that was a fantastic game. So I started there and then had to go back and play the rest of the series.
No, they're great games, definitely one of my favourite games growing up. I think, see then, okay, we went from track and field and athletics, like, what was your next move then? Because I know that you were in the army, so like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I left school, it must have been around about 2017. Joined the Army Reserve while I was at college, Fife College in 2018, studying business management. And I was there through till 2020. And then you recall when the apocalypse hit with COVID-19, the army was being pulled in 100 different directions on civil resilience.
So what was it like during that time then? Because I know it's certainly a topic I keep thinking back that we actually just lived through that, but what was it like when that happened?
So personally, the opportunity came up for me to go full-time in an admin role working in an office in Edinburgh, because one of the things that were just dropped was marketing and recruitment. And the part of the army I was in was a Universities Officers Training Corps, which is the British Army's area established for academic engagement, covering 16 regions across the UK and 160 universities. So within Edinburgh, I took the lead on marketing and recruitment, simply as the supposed young guy in the office that understood how social media could work. Because like so many things in COVID, marketing and recruitment for the army was upended.
Yeah.
For the UOTC, 3/5 of our recruitment leads came from physical engagement, actually getting out to freshers' fairs, having conversations. So when that opportunity wasn't there anymore, we had to very quickly figure out what to do alternatively to reach the people that we wanted to engage and promote the Army's opportunities to.
Yeah.
So for a few months, certainly the whiteboard in the office looked a bit like the Apollo 13 Mission Command Centre, trying to figure out how we do this in terms of attracting people, how do we medically screen and select people, responding to varying different pieces of policy from Scottish Government, UK Government, Army Recruitment Training Command, Sandhurst, and trying to pull all that into a model that works. Now I know that what's of interest to yourself is that in amongst all of that, around about September of 2020, was when I first got involved in esports. And that was nothing more than trying to protect the mental health of those that couldn't come into the barracks. You'll appreciate isolation. We were, a few months.
What was that? What was that like in the barracks? Then you talk about separation. How many guys or girls to a room is it? Like in the barracks, what are we talking? What does that look like?
Varies case by
I remember
case,
seeing the films and you see the bunk beds and probably not like that, is it?
Absolutely. Well, in my particular part of the Army, in the Army Reserve, what our problem was simply people couldn't come in for training nights. Right, people were stuck at home, potentially couldn't get to work, to their studies. So just the isolation was becoming a bit of an issue. Now, I'm a very casual gamer. I wouldn't have ever called myself an esports enthusiast, but it was a chap called John Fleming approached me one day and said, do you think we could maybe get an Xbox evening on the go for some of the guys that can't come in? So I said, right, okay, we could maybe do that. I put it out onto the WhatsApp and felt very naive saying Xbox when all these guys were sitting at home with their gaming PCs and computers. We had a Discord channel set up and never heard of what a Discord was. So the first evening of 4 guys became 8, 8 became 16. We ended up tying into the wider core. And in the end, we had a community of about 250 soldiers all together online, chatting, competing, having social evenings, and just functioning as a community for mental health resilience. And this wasn't an isolated thing. We had this in the UOTC, but this is when esports was really taken off in the British Army as a wider organisation.
So was that happening in different, was that an ideas that were kind of, everyone's having the one idea, or did you all have a big group WhatsApp saying, look, this is working?
Everyone was sort of pulling in the same direction, just what it needed was a sort of unifying centre to pull it all together, which we eventually got in HQ British Army, set up an esports cell with a dedicated engagement team sitting there. So British Army esports really started to take off around about 2020. As did the broader esports industry, I believe, just purely because traditional sport was no longer a thing. Being a football fan yourself, you remember I'm watching empty stadiums.
Yeah,
and so I think that was just the spark that the industry needed to go from what was something that was steadily growing to something that was exponential.
And then obviously we got in touch. So is that when you were leaving the army then? Was that when you were just looking to come out? So when was that? About 2022, was it?
That was January 2023, yeah. So I had a great time there. By the end of that couple of years into 2023, I'd moved from just covering marketing recruitment for Edinburgh for covering the marketing recruitment and analysis for the entire UOTC, so covering over 160 universities across the UK, and then laterally managing the operations as well. Our esports project grew to something beyond what we could imagine. We had guys going out to do casting or commentating on NATO esports events. It became a wider...
Hold on. NATO esports, can you tell me about that?
So
is there a NATO Cup?
There was different variations. I'm completely out of touch now, but certainly for a while we had variations of NATO championships where international militaries could compete against each other because gaming is something that's great to unify. So a way for international armies and soldiers to meet each other, compete against each other, and build a spirit de corps through titles such as Call of Duty, Dota, even Rocket League. It was just a great way for soldiers to engage.
And you think about it, right? A lot of times in esports struggles at grassroots level because there's no places to kind of meet. Everyone's got their life. When you think about the army, it's completely set up for something like that. I mean, I suppose what's army sports has always been pretty strong as well. So this was just another layer to it.
Absolutely. So physical fitness and competing in sports has always been something that the Army's promoted. And such as the semblance and sense of community within the armed forces, that esports, it was very easy for something like that to take off. And I believe I'm correct in saying now that this was after I left, but I think that esports has now been recognised by the Army Sports Control Board as a sport within the armed forces. So soldiers can get more time off and more support to compete and further their development within esports as a recognised discipline.
And there's even people certainly in the army now that I've met since that have got actually in their LinkedIn tag that esports is in their bio. Esports is part of their job title.
Absolutely. So there's various different benefits to esports. So when I started that project, it was simply to keep people connected and to promote mental health during isolation, to support the business case for why we were doing esports and to understand, effectively, why is this of use to the army? We had to look at the broader context of what are the skills that individuals develop through esports, what are the developments in the industry in terms of STEM education. You'll know yourself, having worked in the sector, that the transferable skills through esports, HNC, HND, BTEC is phenomenal. And those skills plug into a lot of future role requirements of the armed forces. So what we've done with 51 Brigades, the HQ British Army in Scotland, was went away and we started to look in detail at how we could support individuals that wanted to study esports, recognise their skills and talents, and then potentially create some form of talent pathway into technical careers in the future.
And yeah, and it makes sense for them. And I think then, what would you say coming from the army, right? And it all being structured, and you'll probably laugh when we get to this next part, right? But it's all structured, everyone's very professional, and this is great, we're all doing it for the right reasons. And then you came into like civil life, would you call it that? Or back to civil life, and then you thought about the opportunity for esports within grassroots. What would you say the biggest challenges you've seen there when people trying to implement it?
Well, I had a great 2.5 years working as a full-time reservist, and certainly some of the skills I got there, not just in terms of, the very basic green skills, but just in terms of administration and building up structures and communication was fantastic. And you see very good practice in other areas, but certainly challenges in integration. Perhaps it's best to talk about when, obviously, I came on board with yourself at Esports Scotland at the time, and we started to look at the strategy. 2023, we're just coming off the great year of 2022, where the first Commonwealth Championship, Scotland had won its first 2 silver medals. And I think it was just a bit of a loose end to say, well, we've achieved something fantastic here, what's next? In terms of developing esports across Scotland, developing really to act as some form of national governing body, which I know that when you set up Esports Scotland was not your intention at all.
Not at all, no.
It was just sort of this natural evolution. When British Esports gave you the tap to build out that structure, you were there. Esports is very similar to traditional sports, and it also has its peculiarities in that, in terms of governance structures, the world of sport is very on top of that.
Yeah, they've had it like over 100 years, some of those sports. So when you think about where they are now, they've had a good head start with it.
They absolutely have. So governance structures, safeguarding, commercialisation, operations, a lot of that good stuff and good practice is out there, which is very transferable to esports. Now, something that makes obviously esports different to a traditional game such as football is that no one owns a football pitch. No one owns the rights to the game football. You have got your game titles out there like EA, Riot, that obviously have certain controls over
their IP.
The IP. So while you can't say that sports governance is a perfect match for esports, there's certainly lots of good practice that can be taken from there. And you know yourself that we made good progress with Sports Scotland on the strategy we did produce for how a national governing body could function. We got that recognition by the Scottish Sports Association to put esports alongside the likes of the SFA, the SRU, and the other governance bodies in Scotland. Obviously, for unfortunate reasons at the time, that body of work couldn't progress. But I think that between the two of us, we've done a good job of addressing a lot of those challenges and certainly laying the groundwork for what something could look like.
And not just that, I think a lot of that, it was a shame that never came to fruition, but I think what else was a shame never came to fruition is all the work we've done with the SPFL to do the football one as well. I mean, you and I had the pleasure of going around the country visiting football stadiums, and I still very fondly pictures of me and you and like at Aberdeen, St Mirren, and it's just a shame that never really picked up as well. What do you think the struggle is between sports bodies and esports? Do you think it's something you felt like, when you look back on it, you think it's something they felt like they had to do, or they never fully grasped it? Do you think that's the way it was?
It's unique to every sport, and I believe that, well, let's take football, for instance. Football has not got a problem. One of my roles just now is an independent board member for the English Schools FA.
Yep.
Purely from a sporting perspective, we're in a great place. We're engaging 850,000 players a year. I think female participation in
Let's
football
talk more about that. Yeah,
about
please.
40%.
I was going to bring that up. Keep talking more about that part.
So, yeah, in terms of a traditional sports body, we're in a very strong place, but we know that we can't take that strong foothold for granted, much as professional football can't take that for granted. There was a PlusNet survey in 2019 that showed that I think it was 61% of English Premier League Gen Z fans wanted their club to get involved in some sort of esport. Challenges in terms of engagement, obviously our ticket prices, accessibility. The Europa League final, you've got to walk down to the pub now to watch a game on TV unless you pay for your BT,
and that wasn't
your
worth
Sky.
watching.
It really wasn't.
No.
So yeah, esports has its place for traditional sports, but they've got to understand how to utilise it effectively, not as a way to replace their traditional sport.
Which is a big worry within some people. I can imagine decision makers think that that's what that's actually going to do.
That's it, and I think that for far too long, there's been a misconception that esports isn't here to take part, it's here to take over. That's simply false. It is a very, very effective engagement tool, Conor McGregor. She's throwing me off now.
Sorry.
But yeah, it's a very effective engagement tool to augment the sport. So coming back into football, you've got, I divide it into three categories of the clubs. You've got your lower earning clubs that have maybe got an operational revenue of about £1 million a year, that if an esports concept came down from their league are looking at this saying, you know, we're already stretched in terms of resourcing staff. We see the benefit. Is this something we've really got to do?
Yep.
On the other end, you've got your clubs that are generating over 100 million operational revenue, your Celtics, your Rangers that are looking at a concept like esports saying, it's great, but actually in terms of the commercial pull-through, this is something we don't need to do. And then I think you've got your sweet spot, your clubs like Hearts, Hibs, your Sheffield Wednesdays, for instance, are sitting around about there saying that we're okay operationally, we're okay commercially, but esports is worth our while to pull through the commercial output and utility. So I believe that those are the three sorts of categories for the clubs. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, just when you were talking there, but I was thinking more when you were saying that point about the clubs that are actually making it work. Like even like Man City, they're doing a cracking job of making it work. They've got multiple teams now that are not just to do with football, and some of their Man City esports teams are pretty much self-sufficient. You know, they're competing in big leagues and big tournaments, so they've got it. It's just, I suppose, they've had a lot of money they could throw at that to build it to what it is. That's the problem. You know, I think it's a big investment for a lot of Scottish clubs, like you said, to even, I don't know, they're probably thinking of a new training pitch, a new shelter, a new this. You know,
potentially a new grass pitch to replace the Astro, which is the discussion in Scottish football just now. But yeah, esports, again, coming back to its utility, take a club like Brentford, for instance, are punching well above their weight in the Premier League, not necessarily on the field where they're at that level, but off the field in terms of their commercial operations and everything else that they're doing. One of their priorities just now is looking at the APAC market and looking at North America. What you can do through esports is start to penetrate those markets through engagement in regional tournaments, participating in gaming competitions, the EAFC Pro Series, for instance, and really expand your reach just beyond television coverage, but also into something that's interactive and access opportunities such as in-game activations. I think that I'm correct in saying that just this week, EAFC have said that you can actually start streaming live matches within the game itself.
Did not know that.
I believe I'm correct in saying that, but maybe fact check the video.
You know what? Listen,
But you can think that if you can pull off something like that, where you've got someone potentially in the Far East watching the Premier League through their Xbox, through their video game, it's fantastic activation and a way to and build your brand overseas.
And there's when people get that, I was speaking to a guy from a marketing agency and he was talking about how what he's actually doing is going out with clubs now and actually building games within Roblox for them. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of football stadiums are now actually within Roblox and they're monetising it that way. But
I don't know if it was sanctioned, but I certainly remember seeing Easter Roads in Roblox form where you can go in and you've almost got the virtual club store there where you walk your character in, you buy something online, much like you would from the club store. And that's another way to engage with the club.
And when you look at Roblox, so it looks very babyish and looks very basic, but you know, the fact is all these kids are certainly watching. We had a guest on the other week that was kind of talking about the Roblox store and the Epic store, but once again, it's just getting more and more. I think you're going to see more and more clubs investing into gaming and having their own stadiums. I know Wimbledon done it, I think rugby's done it. So I suppose it's people that are maybe looking for something a wee bit different direction that are invested in that first. So maybe they're the middle ground clubs that you speak about, people that are too much money or too little. It's the ones like your Hearts Hibs that you mentioned that are maybe going to explore these things and maybe benefit from it in longer term.
I think so. I mean, another really good example is Scottish Hockey, who I've had the pleasure of supporting with their esports. Scotland's third largest team sport, but again, just having the challenge of pulling in kids from non-endemic backgrounds and growing the sport in a modern digital age. So it made perfect sense to take esports into the National Hockey Centre, which is surrounded by some of the top multiple deprivation areas in Scotland, to one, engage people with the sport through esports, two, look at what educational benefits and social mobility benefits could be delivered through esports as a tool used by the sport, and then ultimately grow the sport from that means as well.
I mean, you look where we were partnered with Brave, the Brave Academy, and they came to the hockey centre and they kind of ran a session on the PCs, and then they went outside and they had the hockey sticks, and some of those kids had never touched a hockey stick before in their life.
Exactly, and by the end, I think every single one of them said that they wanted to pick up a hockey stick and go and find out about a club. So it's just using esports to break down those barriers and really promote the opportunity that wouldn't be there otherwise, because like you said, I don't think hockey is part of the curriculum anymore in school. So where else were these kids going to get the opportunity to learn and access the sport?
And that's it. And remember the gentleman that we met from Gen Z at Stirling University? Remember we had the meeting?
Yes,
So his take on esports, I mean, obviously in South Korea is with G2 esports, and it's just absolutely flying out there, right? But he was saying that he looked at it in a different way. He looked at it like it was just a tool that you would use esports. Do you remember the conversation?
I do, yeah. And I think that's ultimately where esports can stand on its own right as a recognised sport and a recognised discipline.
Not G2, sorry.
I forget the exact name.
No,
I forget how long ago that was now anyway, but I do believe that esports can stand on its own right as a recognised sport, which...
At top level.
Yeah, and I had to be convinced of that for a long time, because I've had this conversation with yourself
before. You're scratching your head half the time.
I'm no fan of esports, and I know that's heresy to say, but...
It's fine.
For me, watching an esports event, it's like going back to my first PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
You're sitting patiently watching, waiting for your turn, and twiddling your thumbs, thinking, can I get on now? I'd rather actually play the game than watch, but I completely understand the people that do enjoy esports. But coming from a traditional sports background, particularly in the 2022 Commonwealth Games, where we had esports players calling themselves athletes, if I do my sport well, running a hard 400 metres, you're legless by the end, there's half a chance you're hanging over a fence by the end. You look at someone twiddling their thumbs, and an athlete, I'm not too sure. I had to be convinced.
Yeah, now, for example, when we talk about watching sports, right? I mean, obviously, when I watch the Olympics, the only thing I would really look forward to probably is 100 metres. That's because I'm not really into it. I don't know the athletes that well. Everyone knows Usain Bolt, so everybody tunes in for the 100 metres. Whereas yourself, being a fan of it, you'd probably watch. Well, you know who's up and coming. You know the backstory of these people. You probably trained with quite a few of them. So I think for you it's entertaining. I think for me at the moment there's a game called Valorant, and Riot are doing really well with that, and they've got their series that are going on, and we're starting to know more about the players. My wife enjoys it. We'll watch the matches. So for me, in a sense, esports has become I did enjoy the competitive side, but for me, because of a game I love, it's definitely grown for me even more over the years now, because I genuinely enjoy it as a sport.
That's it. And I think one of the big questions that was hanging over us when we were looking at the strategy for Esports Scotland was, where is esports place? Is it culture and arts, or is it sport? What convinced me, and I'd implore anyone to read, was a 2006 paper by Michael Wagner called On the Scientific Relevance of Esports, where he just talks through and sets out, how did we arrive at traditional sports or at the Olympics today? It was a celebration of skills that were relevant at the time, from chariot racing to sprinting to javelin throwing. If you look at what you need to succeed in society, well, absolutely. If you look at what you need to succeed in modern society now, in terms of your career, in terms of social status for young kids, it's multimodal communication, how effectively you can input messages and commands into a computer or control. And if you look at the evolution of sports, it makes perfect sense that esports sits there, in my humble opinion.
I think it absolutely does. I used to always do a talk and you would describe it, you say people watch it, they train, they get sponsors, you start ratting through everything, everyone in their mind's thinking, oh, sport, and then you say it's gaming.
That's it, and I think that almost once it's pushed past that barrier of having its recognition that it is a sport, is where the industry and teams could look to progress its status, not just in terms of the very, I don't want to say cliquish, but the esports sect, but then look to garner broader engagement with the stories of athletes, where they've come from,
absolutely,
and their development, and then look to grow broader engagement from there.
Yeah, and that's the only way that you grow to love these athletes. You see it all the time in sport and football, and I think even Drive to Survive was a great example of why everybody loves F1 now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
behind the scenes, making the characters come alive, giving it a story, giving it a narrative. That's what sport is, reading the page of the paper, he's leaving, transfer, fallouts. That's what makes it a sport. That's what makes rivalries.
That's it, and I mean, you saw how effective that was. I couldn't have given a toss about F1 until I watched Drive to Survive, but there I was only a few months later, shouting at Max Verstappen, pulling around Lewis Hamilton in the final.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's narrative and that's sport.
That's it.
So in a sense, and I'm going to put you under the spotlight once again, because I love the way you think, Ben. Where would you think, what would you say, how would you sort the world of esports or the governance, considering that nobody owns it? Like, that's the tricky part, right? Like you're saying, games will come and go. That's the thing as well. What games are hot this year might not be hot next year. I think a lot of developers have struggled trying to keep that one game and turn it into an esport. But then, how would you govern it? Because obviously,
the challenge with governance in esports, I think, is that you can only take it so far. So, if we relate it to Scotland, one of Sports Scotland's stipulations to be a governing body is that you've got to have strong relations with a British national governing body, which in turn has relations with an international governing body. In the world of esports just now, I think we've got, the Global Esports Federation, and then there's the other one.
There's the International Esports Federation.
Absolutely, and there's ambiguity as to who fully controls international esports. There has been some sort of signing of a cooperation pact, but it's still ambiguous. British esports was understood for a long time to be the UK government recognised national governing body in esports, understands that there's now clarity that that isn't the case. So in terms of looking to get registered as a sports governing body in Scotland, for starters, there's already going to be challenges until internationally there's clarity there. If I was looking to build out structures, you need to look for an anchor point in terms of your game titles, and probably selecting 2 or 3 games that you know are going to be timeless, and that may look like AAFC Pro. That's not going anywhere. Rocket League, for instance. And then maybe one of the shooter titles, but for all sorts of welfare, safeguarding issues in terms of a mass participation sport. There's issues there. In terms of club development, in terms of membership engagement, in terms of safeguarding, as I said, there's lots of good practice out there already in the sports world. And I think someone that's done a really good job of taking a lot of that forward is John Jackson at Esports Wales, where we both know how hard that he's worked and some of the barriers that he's come up against in trying to get the broader Esports Wales club community off the ground. But ultimately, taking a lot of that best practice, it's not too difficult to do. Once you put it into an actionable plan and you have the trust of the community that can rally around, it's not too hard to form a coherent body to drive esports forward.
But I think you just touched on a bit there, rally around. I think that's what needs to happen. Everyone needs to buy into it and everyone needs to push the same direction, I think.
It does, and I think that was one of the big shames with Esports Scotland, where there was issues with the Scottish Esports League, which frankly, just tarnished the trust that was there with the community, where prior to that event, it was very much on the rise, coming off successful Commonwealth Games, and had really established itself just through natural evolution as the preeminent body in Scottish esports. But like you say, there has got to be that rallying point that everyone can unite behind. There's always going to be conflicts of interest between, well, the education sector, which parties want to commercialise. There's going to be other entities that want to operate with a good degree of freedom in the space. So governance has got to be done properly. But I think the roots of how you build that organisation are a lot more straightforward than some individuals would have you believe, or
I wish you managed to stick around longer, and I think you probably could have been one of the guys to help make it happen, certainly, Ben. But
well, my motivation in esports, because it's never been about me, because I just simply I don't get it as an individual, but I see the benefits that it offers for other people through mental health in the army, developing potential career opportunities, engagement in the classroom. You see the success stories at Dundee and Angus College. I think Alva Academy is one of the big ones where kids that are traditionally disengaged in the classroom are coming in, they're enjoying their esports, and they're getting real benefits in terms of STEM education, but then just broader social education as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And so yeah, it's absolutely right that some form of body takes that work forward. And I know there's appetite in Scotland at Scottish Government level to support initiatives like that through European engagement and a lot of projects on their policy agendas. And I think that part of the output that they're looking for and all the great work that Brian Baglow's been doing on the National Games Strategy is just an understanding of where is esports, how do we fund it, is it sitting under Sport Scotland or is it sitting under culture and sport?
Well, do you know what, I think that we've had some guests on that I think echo exactly those words, so I think we're at a pivotal point, so the story continues, so hopefully it does get better and it does kind of come together in the end. But just like to say, Ben, thank you very much for your time today. Pleasure knowing you, pleasure coming on, and take care.
No, thank you very much.
Cheers, buddy.